This video is a quick overview of how to set up your Works Cited page, as well as just some good to know information about creating the Works Cited page. So one of the things to note from the start, Works Cited is directly tied to MLA. So if you're using a different type of format, say APA or Chicago, there will be a different way to set up your list of sources. The Works Cited is particular to MLA. So with that being said, oftentimes what you have to do with a Works Cited page is look up information. You're not going to remember how to set up every single citation there is. I've been using MLA for many years. I still don't know. I still look them up because that's what you have to do, because there's just so many different types of sources. Now, many books include sections on MLA. So for any of you that are working with a writer's handbook, there's a whole MLA section in it. For those of you that may be working with different types of readings, like this is the elements of argument text I use in some of my classes, there's a whole section on MLA in this book. So you really do have access to MLA in a lot of places. Plus, this is something that is pretty easy to look up and access online. One thing to note is that this last year, or I don't know, maybe it was last year, sometime recently, MLA has switched from 7th edition to 8th edition. So there are some differences in those editions, how you actually set up the citations. You always, it's just a good idea to check with your instructor and see if they have a preference for if you're using an older edition or not. Typically for myself, I will say it's okay to use whatever edition is in the book that we're using for the class. But of course, if you want to stick with the newest version, then that would be the most recent 8th edition of MLA. Now, as far as just some other good to know information, the Works Cited is the last page of your essay. As far as the spacing, font margins, that's all the same. You should double space your citations, 12 point Times New Roman font. It's always a good idea to check margins, make sure they're set at 1 inch. The title of the page is literally Works Cited. So if you put something like bibliography or works referenced, that is not correct. It does have to be titled Works Cited, and the title should be centered. There shouldn't be any sort of dashes, numbering, marking of any kind at the start of each citation. The only way when you know that citations switch is typically with the indent, which for citations on the Works Cited page, you create a hanging indent. It's the opposite of how you would indent a paragraph. And again, I'm going to actually set up a citation page, so you'll see what that looks like in a second. You only want to include sources that you actually summarized, quoted, or paraphrased from in your essay. So you don't ever want to include a source that maybe you just reviewed for information but didn't actually use. You only include the ones that you used. Works Cited entries should match the signal phrases and in-text citation from within your essay. So for instance, if you have authors setting up the signal phrases according to so-and-so, that same author should be connected with that same citation then on the Works Cited page. They should directly match up. In the essay, you're not going to have publication information. You will have the publication information on the Works Cited entries. The idea is that I should be able to look at and find any information that you took from sources within a text, so should anyone else. Pull that information out, flip to the Works Cited page, find that exact source, and then using the information from the Works Cited page, go and locate that source from the actual place that you found it. So if you found the article online, I should be able to go find it online exactly where you found it. If it came from a book, I should be able to go to that book, find it exactly where you found it. And that's the idea behind it. So you always want to make sure that those things do match up. As far as the other kind of big piece to really pay attention to at the Works Cited is double check the type of source that you're citing. You set up a book differently than you set up a website. You set up an interview, different again. You set up a survey, a picture, any sort of visual aid has notes with it. If you are citing a composition or musical notes or a movie or a document, everyone has a little bit different way to set it up. So you got to make sure that you're actually looking at the type of the source that you really have for the correct citation. And then the other piece to pay close attention to is just punctuation. Punctuation is specific. Where the little MLA guideline says it has to go is where it has to go. So just be aware of that as you're moving forward. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and actually set up a Works Cited page. So I'm going to click out of that, go in here, set myself up a new document. I do not recommend using preset templates. They are often really problematic and will cause more sort of problems than what they're worth. So I'm just going to type Works Cited. I'm going to go ahead and get some of my other MLA pieces set. So 12 point, Times New Roman. My title is going to be centered. I'm also going to check this. I'm going to want it to be everything double spaced. I'm going to remove the spaces after paragraphs. So again, there's no extra spacing now in there. I'm also going to just come over here, not file, layout. Check my margins, make sure they're set at 1 inch. Now I can move down, get back to the right-hand side of the page, and then I'm ready to start my first citation. So the first type of citation I'm going to do, it's just a common one that you may come across in college, and that is a type of citation for when you are using a source from what's referred to as an anthology. So an anthology is just a collection of readings or chapters. So I'm going to use just the Elements of Argument book because I had it handy that you had earlier. And so what I would do then is I would go to whatever, you find an article, whatever article I wanted to cite from the book, and then I would start setting it up. Now, what I would need to do is once I find the article, then I got to find the actual citation. So I'd go to my writer's handbook, I would look up in the MLA section, I would find where it's the list of works cited, then I would go to the section that shows how to cite a work from an anthology. And this is literally kind of what you do with every source. You find the type of source, then you go in and you figure out how to set it up properly. All right. So in my book, I've got to just get to the correct citation because again, you always got to make sure you're working with the correct one. And for me, so now that I have it open, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start typing. So if I'm using a work in an anthology, so in other words, part of the anthology, not the entire book, then I'm going to start with the author's last name and first name. So the one that I'm working with, author's name is Robbie Brown. Then I'm going to give the title of the article, which is 140 characters. Spell charges and gel. Note that I put the title in quotation marks because it is, that's how you mark titles of shorter works. Then I'm going to give the title of the anthology. So that's going to be the next place that I go. Which, for this particular book, sorry. One thing to note is to make sure that when you are setting up titles that you do include the full title and not just part of the title. So if there's little extra notes, extra pieces of it, like it doesn't matter how long it is, you do go ahead and write it all out on the Works Cited page. Next thing that I need is if there is any editors. This book does have editors. Windshield. And then of course we need the publication pieces. So I've got to find the publication city. Often there is lots of cities listed. I typically will just pick sort of the first one that pops up. In this case that's Boston. Then it's a publisher. This publisher is Bedford St. Martin's. If you have a really long publication title, you can abbreviate the actual publisher's title. Then the actual date of publication. This is the date that the anthology was published, not the date that the article was published. So that's something to pay a little bit close attention to. And this was 2015. And then page numbers for this are, of Of course, I closed it out of that section to make it more difficult. But I'm going to go back in, I'm going to find it, and it is 554 to 555. And then this is a print source. Now I set this one up in the 7th edition of MLA style because that's what the handbook had in front of me. I'm going to also show you an 8th edition setup just to kind of give you some idea. And again, I'll do a different type of source just to give you a little bit more variety. Please note that right now the citation is not in, it doesn't have a hanging indent, so I'm intentionally kind of leaving that as is. So now maybe I'm like, okay, yeah, that was one source, but I'm using 3 sources. So now I've got to go to my next source. And we'll start here. So I found a source. I'm like, this is great. It's from the library database. So I'm really confident that it's a good source. It's a scholarly source to use in my writing. And what's nice is if you pick from the library website, then you can, it's kind of like cheating, but you can go over here and there's actually this button and you click Cite. And then it will give you all the options for setting up the citation. And so I'm going to go down, I'm going to go to MLA. Notice that MLA does not have any notes telling you if this is 7th edition or 8th edition. So I will just tell you that this is the 8th edition of MLA. So what I'm going to do, because I want to just get that citation, right? It's set up for me, so I don't even have to do anything. I'm going to go back down here. Of course, I want to match the font and everything that I'm using. And I'm also going to come back up here because I forgot to mark this title. So I'm going to mark that title in italics. Titles of books, because it's a complete book. Those get italicized. So now that's all set up. Okay, so there was my second one. Done. All of a sudden I have 2 citations. So again, anything from that library database, you can actually click the Cite It and immediately get the citation set up for you. And then I'm going to do one more way to show you another way besides just going to the book to set up a citation. So I found this article online. I'm like, okay, you know, I want to use this information. It's helpful for my essay for whatever reason, so I quoted from it. I did something with it in the essay itself. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL from this website. I'm going to go to another website called EasyBib. You actually, if you're in one of my classes, you probably have a link to this somewhere on your Canvas page. Down here, you'll see generate citations in MLA. I'm like, okay, I need to cite from a website. I want an MLA 8th edition for this one. Cited. Just kidding. First I got to put in the URL. Then I'll click Cite It. Then what it's going to do is it's going to take me here. It's like, okay, yes, I found this. I'm like, yep, cite that one. So they found some information that says, look, here, we need this from you still. Continue to the final step. When you're using a citation creator like this, it is super, super important to check for accuracy because oftentimes what it pulls is not entirely correct. So this is missing the author, so I need to go back and see if there is an author, okay? And I'm scrolling through, I'm like, I don't see an author for this. Okay, so there isn't an author, so then I don't include it. You can only include what you have available. And a lot of websites don't have authors available. So then I'm going to go back in and see, okay, what other information? Website title. I'm like, I don't know if that was the website title. And so I go back over here and I'm like, that's the article title. Title is Icebreakers. What's the website title? The website title is Cornell University Center for Teaching Innovation. So I need to go back in and type in the correct title. Is for Teaching Innovation, Center for Teaching Innovation. And publisher or sponsor, it is actually Cornell University. When it's a college, it's pretty easy to find that information. If you are trying to figure out who a sponsor is, a lot of times you have to actually come down here And you can look over here, it shows an updated date, and then it also shows Cornell University. You can look at the About Us section and sometimes find it. It very rarely labels it as a sponsor, but a sponsor is whoever is in charge of the website. So again, something you often have to really search for in order to find it. Publication information. So I don't have the specific date that that information was published, but at the bottom, there is a date that it was last updated, which was October 18th, 2018. So that's actually the date that I put in there because that's saying that this information is up to date and correct. Okay. So October 18th. (2018). Okay. And I'm scrolling. Everything else looks good. So I'm going to click Create Citation. And of course I had to scroll down because it's a free website. So now I'm going to take this citation, copy it over, go back to my Works Cited page. Now, because this citation starts, the first letter of it actually starts with an I, it's going to go in between. And you want to alphabetize your citations. So BIW, even though this is the title of the article or the title of the section, it's still what goes first. Therefore, you look at that information to determine the piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here. I still need to create those hanging indents. So I'm going to click on paragraph. Then I'm going to go over here and you notice it says special. If I go down to hanging and then I click OK, now it is set up correctly. And this is 3 different sources. Again, this first one was an example using 7th edition MLA. It is set up as a work from an anthology because that's the type of source that it's from. The second one is an example of a website article. So I found this piece on the website that I wanted to use. I needed to cite it. And then the third one is an article from the library database, so an article from a database. So this just gives you some idea of what it should look like, how to set up, and sort of 3 different formats for doing the citations. One is kind of by hand on your own. The second is, like I said, the library website databases has the citation set up for you. And then of course, you can always use a citation creator. You just have to kind of fix the information to make sure that it's accurate. So that is kind of the basics. Again, Works Cited is not something you should try and memorize or figure out like every single little way to set up each citation. And if you ever can't find a citation, then you want to use something that is the closest to whatever you're trying to cite. So it's kind of based on just a logical assessment of which citation will work best. Biggest thing to remember, the second you use source material, include a Works Cited page. You have to have one, otherwise you're missing a piece of MLA and in danger of plagiarism. So that is all for this video. Of course, anytime, let me know if you have questions.